Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. So, as was said, I'm the Field Chief Security Officer for Palo Alto Networks, covering Western Europe, and I work a lot with defense and intelligence agencies, so hope to share some insights with you this morning. Now, obviously, the theme of the conference is about taking the next step, and what does that really mean from a cybersecurity perspective. Now, one of the main technical drivers that we see happening is AI. And of course, AI can be used for fantastic, productive, and really efficient, positive capabilities. But we also know that threat actors and bad actors are enhancing this technology as well. So what I'd like to do for this talk is to have a little bit of a review of the threat landscape, to see exactly what behaviors that we have noticed through our research Unit 42. I'd also like to review a little bit about the architectures of applications and how AI is changing those and potentially increasing the risk. But one of the most important pieces is really around operationalizing cybersecurity. So I'd also like to make some remarks and comments on what we observe happening inside the SOC. And then if that sounds all a little bit negative, then I'd like to finish on a more positive note about what we can actually do. What are the next steps that we can take to drive better cyber resilience across the industry? So with that, let me start off by talking a little bit about the research that we have from our Unit 42 group. So they're involved in a lot of incident responses. And what we've really observed over the last year is a change in the way in which threat actors are behaving. They're really going for a more disruptive approach to how they're targeting their victims. So it's not just about the usual things that we have seen with extortion and ransomware, but they're actually going to disrupt. And I'm sure inside a military context, that's something that would be very familiar to you all. In particular, around 86% of the incidents that our teams have responded to have observed this kind of disruption occurring. And I think what it really goes to show is that the attackers are continuing to innovate. They're continuing to look for new techniques and practices that they want to prosecute against us. And they're also harnessing new capabilities and new technologies as well. So, some of the information that we've been able to collect is this increase in sophistication. So you can see the numbers here. Almost 9 million unique O-days are discovered on a daily basis. And that's just incredible, the rate at which bad actors are able to exploit known vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities that they've discovered. In terms of the scale that they've been able to use as well, we've seen massive increases in their attempts to exploit these vulnerabilities. So over 400% in the last year. And then finally, on the speed, in the same way that we can adopt new capabilities and new technologies to automate and be more efficient, then we've got direct evidence of bad actors doing exactly the same thing as well. So you can see here that with their automation and the tools that they are able to use, then they can now begin to do exploits and exfiltrations within just a single hour. So it's quite clear that we need to really think about how we can do our protections more and more in real time. Part of the problem that we see as well, and these are the numbers from a recent report from January from IBM, is that traditionally the way in which we try to counter some of these effects are to buy some tools. So you can see that when you talk to cybersecurity leaders, that the tool sprawl and the amount of capability that you have to harness to effectively protect your organization is really seen as an impediment for that cyber resilience and secure operations. And even further, that 80% of organizations who have this fragmented approach, they can see that they really struggle to be able to protect their organizations. So On the one hand, we're seeing changes in attacker behavior. On the other hand, we're seeing perhaps not the most efficient response. And if we look at the attack surface as well, now there's always new technologies that are available, but we have to be able to apply our set of cyber controls across an increasingly large and expanding attack surface. So some of the general points here, moving towards a DevOps culture where you're beginning to create cloud-native applications. You need to be able to align your security controls to the ways in which the DevOps teams are running. Some other examples you can see here are about when you begin to share information. How do you bring together, coalitions? How do you decide what the risk profile of the organization is that you wish to share is behaving? How do you make sure that you do the good due diligence on your own side? Multi-cloud. So we've heard in some of the side events and meetings yesterday, there's an increasing use of cloud in the military context, and of course that's not all just going to be on one cloud. There are many options, whether that is operating a private cloud or using some of the hyperscalers as a public cloud. But what it means is that you've got more and more workloads distributed across a larger and larger piece of technology, which ultimately is increasing the attack surface. And then AI and the use of shadow AI. So as I'm sure you've all tried some of these SaaS-based AI applications, they're extremely useful. But there's an absolute risk that you've got shadow IT on a different level with the overexposure of potentially sensitive data. Now, most of our internal staff are, well-meaning, but they are often busy. Sometimes they're distracted, and sometimes mistakes can be made. So again, we have a risk over the overexposure of data. And then bringing in the non-human elements. So with operational technology, with IoT, and of course inside the military, you'll have many devices that fit into that category as well. Now, obviously, most of these devices were designed and deployed for their functionality, and not necessarily for their ability to be updatable, cyber-secure platforms. So again, you've got a legacy situation where you need to deal with perhaps older operating systems and make sure that those are protected as well. And then third party and supply chain. So we had mention of this earlier on in the opening keynote as well. It is crucial to be able to understand, first of all, what your supply chain is. What is your third party risk? What is your third party risk, i.e. your fourth party risk, and so on. So being able to understand where any compromises could happen inside the whole chain of events is increasingly important as well, because we know that's where bad actors can apply. And then, of course, you've got multi-domain operations when you have to collaborate, when you have to communicate, when you have to share data as well. All of that is increasing the attack surface too. And if you look at what we do as an industry, then we have a whole load of tools. So you can deploy firewalls, you can deploy web application firewalls, you can have CI/CD pipeline tools, you can have take your pick. And the challenge, therefore, is that how can an organization operationalize all of this technology without affecting the operational resilience and having too high a risk. So, some organizations have, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 different tools, and this is extremely challenging to do so. And then let's put that inside your context here. If you think about, when you have common backbone networks where you need to interconnect sensors and effectors, you've got common data sets, you will have each of your own national defense clouds and information. There's a real need to connect in kind of maybe non-military systems here, for example, first aid, hospital services. You can see that when you come together and when you collaborate, that you have a massive attack surface that needs to be defended. And then looking in more detail at what the bad actors are doing. So as I mentioned in my opening piece, that they're using AI to turbocharge what they can do, so they can effectively do more with less now. So some of the numbers here from our report, a 300% increase over the last 4 years. And in 20% of cases that we analysed, then you can see that they were able to initial access, compromise, and do data exfiltration in less than 1 hour. And then with 45% of those cases, the data was actually exfiltrated onto a cloud platform. So they are innovating, they're using new tools, and they're going faster than before. And then if you look at from IBM's data breach report, you can see that each time one of these breaches occurs, the actual financial impact to the organization is increasing year on year. And in particular, in the last year, it's gone up by an additional 10%. So I think we can agree there's quite a challenging threat landscape there. Now, the other element that I think is really important, back to my opening comments on AI and AI applications, are that there's also been a technology revolution inside the application space as well. So many of you may be familiar with the old three-tier application where you had a front end, some business logic processing in the middle, and then some database on the back end. Well, over the last 10 years, that's completely changed to a more microservices, more distributed architecture that you can see here. So you need to provide different kinds of infrastructure for your application to run on. Again, you still have the front end, but you now have to think about the data piece as well. So this move to the cloud has been like the second innovation, and that means that things happen a lot more quickly. You need to be able to build, you need to be able to deploy, you need to be able to run, and you have to maintain that application. And of course, that has implications for how you need to secure all of this as well. But now bring in AI, and that means the application architecture has got to change yet again. It's not just a case of bringing in a large language model and adding it into your application. There's a lot more to consider. I'll just highlight a few areas here. There's the data piece. So these transformer AI applications need to be trained on data. They need to have data that they can use for their inferencing. And that means that you now have to think about how you're going to protect that data. Where is the data? Who owns the data? What is the degree of sensitivity of the data? And how is it classified in terms of the input side for training and also on the output side as well? Changes that need to be made to the infrastructure. You can bring in different libraries that are used to provide the capability, and of course you've got hardware considerations with GPUs, and we're all familiar with those organizations that are making huge amounts of more powerful compute on the GPU side. And then with LLMs, you have the selection option. I mean, do you use an LLM from a hyperscaler partner within your own tenant? Or do you use one of the open source available language models? So for sure, a lot more complexity with an AI app. And of course, with more complexity, there are more risks that need to be considered here. Things like prompt injection on the LLMs themselves. Are there any malicious backdoors and codes inside the LLM? You perhaps, I don't know. From a data point of view, as I mentioned, data sensitivity is extremely important to understand that. And then on the infrastructure, you've got typical challenges as well around remote code execution, making sure you have all your vulnerabilities patched, and also that you have adequate levels of segmentation there as well. So new challenges that need to be considered. And remember that all of this is happening at speed on the cloud. And then we get to the next wave, if you like, of AI, which is agentic AI, where you begin to modify these applications to actually have some agency to go and do something. So you want them to be able to, control devices. You want them to be able to make decisions. You want them to be able to interact with your existing systems. And now the architecture gets more complicated still. So here you can see some of the elements. You need to bring in these action items here. And then there's also the memory piece as well. So when you use some of these modern AI applications, it remembers the previous interaction you've had with it. It needs to store that, and that's both on the short term and the long term, because they end up effectively building a personal relationship with you. And again, I'm sure you've used some of these tools where you don't have to keep repeating the previous contextual statements. It understands that you're part of the same interaction. And then the infrastructure is changing as well with some of these low-code and no-code pieces. So individuals are able to effectively hook together flows and processes to create new capability. Now, those people who are doing that maybe understand the business flow and the process perfectly, but they probably don't understand the risks from a software engineering perspective. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the agentic AI piece is covering more and more complexity. And of course, that means you're adding new risks to each of these. So could the memory be poisoned, for example? Are there risks that there could be a privilege escalation and compromise? And are the platforms properly configured? And again, do we have the correct level of segmentation? So fantastic upside opportunity, but also a risk that needs to be managed as well. So a simple piece of guidance on this is that with AI applications, you have your kind of general approach to managing technology risks, which involves making sure that you have the right level of segmentation, make sure the endpoints are protected, make sure the applications are done. So that, of course, still needs to happen. But when it comes to the amplified risks, so some of the pieces we've spoken about, data leakages, privacy concerns, the supply chain, you really need to think about how those are going to be protected inside the environment. And then there's some newly introduced risks as well. So I mentioned prompt injections, and I'm sure we've all heard your favorite story of people being creative with what they're asking these tools to do and coming back with the non-intended and potentially dangerous answers as well. Jailbreaking, and then of course hallucinations as well, where the outputs are plainly just wrong. They're incorrect to do that. And of course, if you're using that as part of an agentic application that you wish it to make some to undertake some actions from, then you need to be careful and caution that. So, what is the adequate response? Well, obviously for the traditional risks, continue doing what everybody is currently doing. We know how to understand and manage those. On the amplified risks, then really our guidance is that security teams need to update and enhance the controls. You need to gain visibility first of all, and you need to understand elements of the supply chain risk as well. And then for these newly introduced risks, really it's going to involve bringing in at least a governance model for AI. What is acceptable use? What is unacceptable use? What data is accepted for training? What data is accepted for the output side? And make sure that there's a broader governance process around the use of AI applications. And in that way, we can have the joys of the productivity gains. Again, the challenge that we see in this area is that the industry does what the industry always does, which is to innovate on point products. So there's a collection of tooling and technology that's available to try and protect this, from AI red teaming to being able to do security around the agents. But my general point here is that all of these tools, they're not sharing threat intelligence. They're not connected and integrated to each other. And they also involve having to have their own operations and management screens to do it. So the view is that that's not going to be successful in protecting those applications. So that's what we see happening inside the AI application space. And then moving on to the Security Operations Center. So the Security Operations Center is obviously tasked with having visibility, understanding what the alerts are, being able to respond, and otherwise be the sort of beating heart of the cyber operation. However, the challenge that we see with this human-centered SOC is that it really is just not fit for purpose anymore. There's more and more has been asked due to the evolving threat landscape and the technology changes in the architecture, and the way in which we currently build the Security Operations Center is no longer fit for purpose. So here you can see there's a massive increase in the number of alerts that are coming in due to this more distributed and wider attack surface. You can see that the number of tools that are continually being added into the SOC is increasing all the time, which of course challenges the operational capabilities to do that. And then probably most presciently is that it's taken 2 to 3 days for these typical SOC to have its mean time to recover. So have you noticed that something's happening? Can you contain it? Can you remediate it? And can you get those services back up? What's happening is that it's taking far, far too long. There's a real disconnect between the ways in which bad actors can operate and the ways in which the typical SOC can respond. So our conclusion is that it's impossible to be able to operationalize this without moving to a more real-time and more automated capability. So if we just have a little bit of a look at the way in which a typical modern SOC is instituted, it's like this. There are sources, there are data layers, there's analytics, and there's also the AI and augmented response piece. And then you have to bring into that the people as well. So a few of the challenges that we see here, having separate tools for all of these endpoints means that it's very difficult to have a consistent view over what is actually going on. On the data layer side, again, having different repositories that are not normalized, that are not regularized, that are not able to integrate with each other, again, means that you're challenging the efficiency of the operations. And then when it comes to the analytics piece, there's still too many manual, static processes that are in use. And sometimes they're really much based on what was observed in the past rather than what these new and changing threat capabilities look like. And then analytics. There's analytics for this platform, analytics for another platform, but are they really and truly integrated with each other? We would question that. And then when it comes to the analyst piece over here about how to do the automation, then it's still very much piecemeal and it's not completely integrated and targeted. And then you can use some forms of AI inside the SOC, but ultimately there's always the human in the loop. And when you have a human in the loop, as I showed on the previous image, you can see that they can be overwhelmed, they can be stressed, they may not make the correct decisions. So we clearly see challenges in the operational aspects. And back to what I was saying at the beginning, this is what we see the bad actors beginning to exploit, because they know that with the attack surface that we have to defend and the tooling that we use, that they can provide that disruption to our operations. So what do we really need to do? And of course, everybody is familiar with the idea of shifting left, but it's being able to do it that's really important. So what we have to do when we think about protecting these modern cloud workloads is to move the capabilities and the protection as far to the beginning of the process as we can, so that we don't overexpose the application when it's in its deployed space, when it's in its runtime, and when it's being maintained. So shifting left and building capability as far into the beginning of the process as possible is important. We have to assume that we cannot pre-predict and understand every single event that's going to happen. So when something does occur, we need to make sure that we can recognize it, first of all, have the visibility, but also prioritize and remediate that. And we need to be able to do that at scale. So with many, many applications running across multiple clouds, we have to be able to achieve that as well. And ultimately, the goal that we want to reach is to be able to stop these attacks in real time. So if we can now redress the speed and capability of the bad actors with our speed and capability to respond, then we'll be able to achieve that operational resilience and better protect our organizations. Another piece I do want to mention as well is on vulnerability management as well. So some of the stats again that we have collected. So this is an analysis of the CVEs that have been published just in the first quarter of 2025. You can see that there's 159 have been actively exploited in that period, and this is becoming faster and faster. You can see there's an arms race going on. A vendor has a vulnerability that gets notified through the responsible process. Somebody either on the dark web or the real web creates a proof of concept code for it. They then go and use one of the publicly available tools like Shodan.io, and then they understand what the market opportunity is. How many of vendor X's product Y running version Z is available on the internet, and then it's an arms race to see whether they can use that proof of concept code to compromise your environment before your patching regime is able to kick in and remediate. So we see this happening faster and faster. Here in the analysis that over a third of these new vulnerabilities were exploited in less than 24 hours. Now, if that happens notification happens on a Thursday evening in the US, then that means that potentially there's a huge time gap before Europe is awake on a Monday morning to do something about it. So it's important that we operationalize and move more towards a real-time approach for the vulnerabilities as well. So just in the final few minutes, after doing a little bit of scaring you, I would like to say that ultimately we do believe that security is solvable. There have been fantastic innovations, developments in computer science. There's, as we mentioned as well, the use of AI, and bringing together these capabilities, we believe that we can actually solve the problem, and that. The way to solve that problem is to take a more holistic approach and to use, what we call platformization. And the idea here is not just to buy many products from one vendor, that's just simple consolidation, but to actually adopt an approach that does the integration, brings the flows together, and allows for these more complicated problems that cannot be solved by a disparate set of tools. So for platforms to be successful, they obviously need, that approach needs to be adopted, but they also need to be modular as well, so that when new capabilities are available, these can be added and integrated into the platform without adding yet another security tool. And they also need to be able to use AI to move more and more towards this real-time ability to adapt and respond to the threat landscape. So what we have observed with our customers who have undertaken this approach are a number of really pertinent and obvious benefits. The first one here is that native integration, being able to have all of the data that you need to be able to operate inside a single platform is self-evidently a benefit to your operations. Also, having a complete visibility is crucial as well, because we know that whenever a breach does occur, and then the analysis is done later, when we go back and see, there has always been a signal to indicate that something was wrong, that something was happening. The problem is that we were not looking in the right place at the right time. So having that greater sense of visibility offers a far better opportunity to be able to deal with those threats. There's obviously a greater efficiency as well. You don't have to have so many staff trained on product A, product B, product C, product D, product E, and so on. You can have a more consolidated operational model based on that as well. And then obviously there are cost benefits as well. So, CISOs are always under pressure to show value and return on investment from the cyber spend. And this approach can absolutely help to facilitate that. So that's what we mean by a platformization approach. And then let me just show you how we can apply that in an example that we're all familiar with. Let's take the CISA zero trust model. So we're all familiar with the idea of our users, devices, interconnected networks, consuming applications and workload that's processing data, And here we obviously have the operational pieces around, visibility and analytics, and then the automation and orchestration piece. So by having a platform approach to Zero Trust, there are a number of real benefits that you can see here. So it includes all of your people, devices, and applications. It gives you a single platform over which to be able to operate, giving you the operational efficiency. It's tightly integrated with automation so that you can do things faster and be more able to meet the response of the behaviors of the bad actors. And it also allows you to use your existing processes that you have established inside your organizations to do that. There's no need to change those. And then some of the other outcomes we can see, you can have this better user experience because you're able to have everything integrated inside a platform, as well as the analytics, conditional access, and the opportunity to share policies across multiple different networks. Here we're using some of the US ones as an example. So my kind of final takeaway here is that if you were to take some next steps with Zero Trust, then here is a bit of a roadmap that you can consider. So start off by identifying and verifying all of your users' apps and devices. Then begin to enforce the least privilege model across the other platform. After that, you can then apply this holistic inspection so that you can continually evaluate and see the streams. You then can focus on the data side of it, make sure that every time data is accessed or somebody attempts to move data can be controlled. And then think about ultimately the user experience. So we heard in one of the other side events yesterday that one of the challenges in Ukraine was that bringing in many new people into the armed forces to use military tools, the friction was so high that they were actually not even bothering to use the tools. So we should always be able to focus on the user experience, because if we give a bad user experience, then what we can find is that our users will undertake risky behavior and maybe expose the organization. So that's a way to apply Zero Trust to a platform piece. And just to finish here, well, the next step is yours to take. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.